Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our 2020 OHL Draft Review. I'm here this year with Tyler. Hello, Tyler.
Hey, how's it going?
Tyler's done some work in the OHL, most notably with the Mississauga Steelheads. We're Mississauga Central, I guess, so we're going to be kind of biased in that way, I guess, in this show. But he also runs a podcast, if you want to talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So the podcast that I run is called the Pro Shot Podcast, and it's one that I've done for probably about a year and a half now. And we just recently started this year doing the OHL stuff, especially with the Steelheads. So we're really passionate about the Steelheads. Really passionate Steelheads fans, all of us. Just really excited to get into the draft here.
Cool. So obviously this year is a little bit of a different draft in way of there was probably a consensus number one overall pick in Adam Fantilli. But I guess maybe a week ago or a week and a half ago, he committed to the Chicago Steel of the USHL. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I guess, when somebody commits to an American program, there's no way. There's sort of a stigma that nobody wants to take him. You're going to lose out on that pick. You don't know if he's going to commit. So the North Bay Battalion instead take Ty Nelson, defenseman, from the Toronto Junior Canadiens.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go into Ty Nelson a little bit. So first off, he's a right-handed shot, and I think that's really what North Bay was needing, especially with the departure of Nick Grima, who was one of their bigger assets on defense this year. They definitely needed that for sure. He's 5'7", 174 pounds.
Room to grow, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. He's still young. So the thing I like about Ty Nelson is the fact that he's a two-way defenseman, and it's not rare to see that, but it's almost uncommon to see someone like him with the game that he plays. He plays kind of like a mix of a physical game, sort of like that playmaking style. So he's a great offensive defenseman in that respect. And for North Bay to pick him first overall, I think that was the right choice. They needed quite a few things with the way that North Bay was going. Defense was one of them. Goaltending was one of them, and forwards. But more urgently was defense.
I would say defense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So they've got some guys like Paul Christopoulos, who they picked last year. Ryan Thompson. They've got a good, healthy mix of guys. They're all 2002, 2003 born. But to go with Ty Nelson above all else, I think it was just the right pick.
Right. Like you said, they're a young team. And to get a defenseman like this first overall, I think is very important to them, important for them. Obviously, the goaltending, you never see goaltenders. I guess last year with Sarnia taking Ben Gaudreau. But you hardly ever see goaltenders, especially in the NHL, go high in the draft. So you could find a goaltender later on in the draft, I'm sure. But I think it was really important for them to get that defensive piece, because even you and myself watching games live this year, North Bay was one of those teams where I was like, not to sugarcoat it, but wow, these guys probably need help on the back end. So I think it was
without question.
For sure. So with Fantilli, I'm no matter what you need as a team, I'm on the side of you always pick the best available player. But with Fantilli obviously committing elsewhere, I think that taking a defenseman, especially this defenseman, was the best move available for them.
Yeah, and you got to look at, again, from the games that we saw this year, North Bay just looked mediocre. Like you said, like I'm going to go a little less sugar-coated here. They didn't look good on defense at all. Like, their defense could not help Joe Brvedich catch anything. They really couldn't. They couldn't bail him out at all.
No.
So
and you need to help your goaltender above all else.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you look at the games that North Bay came to PFF Center, Brvedich was standing on his head. Like, Christopoulos didn't play too bad, but there weren't a whole lot of great defensive plays that really kind of helped them out there. And I don't know. I personally say North Bay just wasn't a great team overall this year. hence why they finished
Well,
last
they
place.
picked first overall. Yeah.
Yeah, but just I don't know. I feel like their defense above all else was the weakest link.
For sure. So we move ahead to the second overall pick, and obviously one that's very important for the Niagara Ice Dogs, as they did not have a first-round pick last year. We're not going to get into that. That's for a different video. But they didn't have a first-round pick last year. I believe they won't have one next year either. So for them to kind of trade away assets halfway through the year and focus on getting a top pick, and obviously here they get the second overall pick, I think was super important for them because they're not going to have that opportunity next year. So they pick a centerman here from the same team that played with Ty Nelson, the Toronto Junior Canadiens. Pano Filmus, a little bit of a different name here.
Yeah, so first off, I want to point out that Pano Filmus was the captain of the Toronto Junior Canadiens. So I think Niagara went with a pretty good pick in him. So he is a 5'11" centerman, so he's not quite as tall as some of the other guys in the draft, but there's still room to grow. 157 pounds and a right-handed shot. Not too bad at all. During 59 games listen to this, 59 games in the GTHL this year, 41 goals and 63 assists for 104 points.
Which is good.
Exactly what they needed.
Yes, exactly. He could be. This is a guy. Besides maybe his height, you know what? I don't even think height and weight matters anymore. You look like a guy. You look at a guy like Mitch Marner. This is a guy who could be their first line center, easily.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that Niagara needed, especially with the departures of Akil Thomas and Phil Tomasino at the trade deadline, they needed that scoring winger, and they're going to need someone to kickstart their rebuild, because at this point it's pretty safe to say they're going into a rebuild. And I think Filmus was the guy. Like,
yeah, it's true. Like, it's towards the end of the season, it was very obvious, Niagara, you're in a rebuild. Like, there's no way to sugarcoat it. You have a bunch of years of success in a row, making it to an OHL final in 2016. It's time to rebuild and retool, and a guy like this is going to help them do that. He's going to be a first-line centerman probably in this league, if not next year. I mean, you saw a guy like Cole Perfetti step into Saginaw's lineup and become a top player in his rookie year, and obviously this year he took that step most players take. So I think there's obviously potential here for a guy like that to step into that role. So we move on to Sarnia, who gets a top 5 pick again for the second year in a row. 128 points in 59 games for Nemestikov. So it's safe to say that Sarnia now has another scorer.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that they needed. I mean, they were lacking, other than Jacob Perreault, look at who they had. I mean, they had Ty Voigt, who is arguably one of the better rookies this season, but they were just lacking that scoring touch. And I think that by taking a big centerman, especially with losing Ryan McGregor, they don't have a whole lot of center depth, and they really don't have a lot of options other than Jamison Rees. So I think it was a good pick to pick Maxim Mesnikov.
Yep.
And honestly, I'm going to be honest, I could see him as their first line center for a couple of years to come now.
Right. It's another case of a guy who could probably step into a role like that. And we're not saying right out the gate, obviously, like, rookies, you see it all the time. Rookies have a hard time adjusting to the league at first, I find, every year.
Look at all the defensive prospects that they've got coming up too, and like they've got a lot of great prospects in that Sarnia team. And then plus, look at Ben Gaudreau, who his rookie season, he didn't do that bad either. Sarnia is one of those teams that they're going to struggle for a while, and then they're going to find their game eventually, but you just got to give them the time to do it. I think that by adding Nemestikov to the roster, it's definitely going to help them. It's just a matter of, how well can they play and how they're going to do.
Right. So we move along to the 4th overall pick, the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, who, since I've been watching the league, have not picked this high in a while. They've been a very successful team for for a number of years, even leading up to this year. So it's a little bit refreshing to see them pick high in the draft. They pick centerman Bryce McConnell Barker. Try saying that 10 times fast. From the London Junior Knights.
This was a little bit of a shocking pick. In all honesty, I really do like the fact that Sault Ste. Marie went with another centerman because they're, again, kind of making better choices with their centers. But I didn't expect Bryce to go that high. I mean, maybe Sue saw something that we didn't, but I mean, they definitely need more centers. I mean, at this point, who's their top centerman? Joe Carroll.
And he won't be around much longer. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean,
you're gonna need a guy. Yeah, you need someone to come and fill that role. We've talked about it so much with top centermen, obviously so far. You're gonna need a guy to come in and fill that role. So moving along to the Kingston Frontenacs, I think they may have a first line center of the future already. I don't know. They took a guy last year who's supposed to be pretty good, and he's been producing. Probably one of the better. If you played over a full 68-game season, Shane Wright probably would have had the best rookie season we've seen since John Tavares, if not ever. Not even rookie season, sorry, exceptional status season. But this year, Kingston picks another centerman, Paul Ludwinski. Sorry, a little bit of a tongue twister we got here going on. And he played with the Toronto Marlboros.
Honestly, I can't stress enough how great of a pick this is, and I'm really excited for Kingston. Looking at their potential 1 and 2 centermen, Shane Wright and Paul Ludwinski, eventually. But honestly, I'm blown away. Other than the fact that he's played 7 games with the Bantam AAA team at 9 points. Despite that, points don't always mean everything. From what I've seen from him, he is a very offensive centerman. He likes to move the puck around a lot. This is a good pick for Kingston.
There you go. And like you said, that 1-2 punch, there's not much to be said here. It's a 1-2 punch of Shane Wright and Ludwinski going forward. So this is a good pick. Kingston has some good pieces. They've showed in the second half of the season. They pulled it together, and I even went to Kingston to watch a Steelheads game in Kingston, and they came back from that. I think they were down 4-1 against the Steelheads, and they got some pieces there. They got some young players, but they will be a good team. And they have Shane Wright. Like, what else do you say, right? So we move ahead to the Hamilton Bulldogs, who picked Jorian Donovan. Did I say that correctly?
Who is a defenseman? Yeah. You did.
Who is a defenseman. Obviously, we've seen a lot of centers and forwards. This year seems to be the draft of the forwards, especially centermen. But another defense coming off the board here.
Yeah, and I think let me just get into a little bit about Jorian Donovan.
Yep.
So he's originally from the Ottawa area, so a little bit of change of scenery. Not that matters much, but so his stats this year: 38 games, 27 points. So he's not a huge point producer. But I don't think that matters to Hamilton much, because look at the guys that they lost so far. They lost Isaac Nurse, who's an OA.
Yep.
They lost Cade Landry. And, they're losing more players next year, but I mean, I think Cade Landry was one of the biggest losses on their defense.
Definitely.
So drafting somebody to kind of replace Landry and kind of get the feel for what the big club could look like, I think they made a good pick there, enhancing their defense.
So we move along now to the 7th overall pick, the Mississauga Steelheads. I like this pick a lot. Even if it wasn't a very good pick, I'd probably say I like this pick for a certain reason. But the Mississauga Steelheads took Zach Lavoie of the Toronto Nationals. Last year, the Steelheads needed to address the back end, the defense, and they did that in taking Ethan Del Mastro and, adding some more pieces, not through the draft, but or adding Chaz Sharp through the draft as well. But they needed to adjust their defense. They did that this year. You need to look at the scoring, and they get their scoring in Zach Lavoie.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at guys like James Hardy and Cole Schwinn, who are really up there with the scoring last year, but it's still, I found that as good as they were still lacking that scoring forward that they needed. And I think with Zach Lavoie, he sort of, in a couple of games that I've seen him play, he sort of shows kind of shades of Owen Tippett in a way. Not so much in the goal scoring sense, but in the way his style of play kind of comes in. But he did have 40 points in 30 games, so he was just over a point per game. I personally really like this pick.
Yeah, I think
it was the right choice.
I think it's a great pick. You need that scoring, and you have all the depth guys. You have that coming up through the system. You have guys who are scorers, playmakers. Yeah. You need scoring for sure, and obviously with a guy emerging like James Hardy, and you have Cole Schwint, your playmaking centerman. It's a good mix, and maybe not this year, but the year after, a mix of Lavoie and Hardy could be pretty deadly. But even going into next season, a guy like this could make an impact as a rookie.
Absolutely. I mean, I would look at your options where you'd start him. So I would see how he gets give him a little feel for the game, see how he goes. I'd start him on the third line, and then if he proves that his confidence is going up, I'd move him up a couple lines, rotate your lines a little bit, see how he fares with Hardy or with Schwint or Canady or whoever you're going to pair him with. But I think that this was not only a good decision, I think that Zach Lavoie is going to be a huge impact wherever he fits in on the lineup. I think it was just a great pick.
Yeah, and obviously it's going to take rookies time to adjust to the league. So I would say,
yes,
we probably see him come into his own in the second half of the season. But moving on from the Steelheads, the Erie Otters take a defenseman in Spencer Sova.
Okay, now Spencer Sova, I think I like this for Erie. It's because how do I say this in a way that's not going to completely obliterate them? Erie had no defense before this other than Drysdale.
Drysdale, yeah.
That was pretty much their defense. So with Spencer Sova, he was born in Windsor, so not too far from the border. I think it's a good pick for them, especially if they're looking to enhance their defense. He's a point guy. He's definitely a point guy. He's more of an offensive defenseman, I find, more than defensive. He had 57 points in 57 games, 19 of those being goals, and the other 38. The other 38 were assists. Do I think that it was a good pick for Erie? Absolutely. You don't know if Drysdale is going to be back next year, depending on where he goes in the draft, or depending on how ready he is for the NHL. But let's say, for argument's sake, that Jamie Drysdale comes back next year, and Spencer Sova makes the team right out of training camp. You could potentially see, possibly, an Ethan Del Mastro type with Spencer Sova, in the sense that he could learn his game fairly quickly, and I feel like Erie's the perfect fit for him, as they need a defense, as they need offensive talent as well.
Not only do they need that defenseman, they need probably that offense from the back end as well. Obviously, they have Drysdale, but it doesn't hurt to have more. So we move on to the 9th overall pick in Hunter Height to the Barrie Colts. Another centerman. Obviously, last year, Barrie got their defensive help in Brant Clark, and obviously, he's a great player. What else to say? He's going to be a special player, but they got a centerman here this year.
Other than the fact that he has the potential to be a top 2 centerman, I'm blown away by Barrie's pick.
There you go. I think it's a good pick. They need they had a lot of graduating players who were producers for them, so they need to kind of restock that pile or that cupboard of producers. And I think they did great at last year's trade deadline and really retooled for the future. So adding a guy like this, Barrie, as much as it pains me to say, is going to be pretty good. Probably next year, if not in 2 years. So we move on to the Owen Sound Attack, who take a center. Everyone's taking centers this year. You get a center, and you get a center.
I think this is the most center-rich
Yeah.
I think it's like Oprah's giving away center.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the most
That's what I was.
center-rich draft that I've ever seen.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. So yes, Owen Sound takes Cedric Goudon.
Yeah, I honestly I think that it's going to be beneficial for Owen Sound, especially because, I think again, I'm starting to notice a common theme with these teams. Owen Sound was kind of lacking that scoring punch last season too, as we saw, and I think it was good for them for picking Guindon because look at how he played this season. He lit up the lamp, right? He was playing in a Bantam AAA for the Rockland Nationals.
Yep.
So points, it's like I said, points in games don't necessarily mean everything, but he's an offensive threat. That's something that they really needed. And he likes to get into the gritty areas that not a lot of players like to do. He can go anywhere from the ice and shoot. So he had 24 goals and 35 assists, 59 points. Nice and crispy.
Crispy.
Nice and crispy. But yeah, he's one of those guys that will take risks and shoot from anywhere. And I think that's what Owen Sound wanted, is a top guy who can do that.
It's a good pick for them. I think they had a very I don't want to say, I guess uncharacteristic year last year. They had to do some retooling. So I think this is a good pick for them. I would say a safe pick. Nothing crazy. It helps them in a way that they need help. So yeah, I would say it's a good pick. Now Sudbury at 11th overall takes a centerman. Surprise. It's just going to be centermans from here on out, I guess. David Goyette.
Yeah, for sure. And see, the thing that's unique about David Goyette is he was originally from Quebec. So, and he declared for the OHL draft, which is, you don't really see that nowadays. You don't really see players from Quebec coming into the OHL, which I think it's pretty cool.
It's usually the opposite, actually, I find sometimes. So this is different. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of a reversal of fortunes, which is good. So he played for the Selects Hockey Academy, the U15 team. Sudbury, I think they got a real steal in David Goyette, in the sense that, again, he's another point producer. And I think especially with Quinton Byfield, you never know what's going to happen with Byfield next year and how the draft's going to go. But if he doesn't come back, I think they're going to need a backup plan for sure. Mm-hmm. So obviously with, guys like, Shane Bullitt, obviously not there anymore, but, they had a couple of graduating centermen that they need to fill that hole.
So moving on to the Guelph Storm, who had the 12th overall pick. They picked Matthew Portras, another center, out of Brooklyn, Ontario, not Brooklyn, New York. I thought that was a cool tidbit. Brooklyn, Ontario. And he played for the Whitby Wildcats.
It was a good pick again for Guelph. I mean, they have a lot of great center depth already, but I think that they were again kind of looking for that guy who could be the top center because they're all great players. Don't get me wrong, but I think they were going to look for that guy who can take over that top center role when
perhaps Hill
is done. When
Hillis
is done, when Ralph, he's going to move up to the second line. They were just looking for that top line center.
Right. And like you said, like a guy like Cam Hillis may not be back. He could start his professional career, and we've seen it so many times. So I would say, it's a safe bet for sure. Oshawa with the next pick at 13th overall with Aiden Castle, another Toronto Junior Canadiens player. He played on that team with so many others that were drafted in this draft, including Ty Nelson. A left winger.
He's a Mississauga native, so it's he's not far from home, which is good. He's
bittersweet.
Playing nice and comfortably. Yeah, it's if anytime you see Mississauga natives go into a different team, you're like
yeah.
It's too bad, but I mean, I think it's really good. I mean, Oshawa was to me with this pick, they're enhancing their goal scoring, and in the sense that they traded for Phil Tomasino at the deadline, they gave up a boatload of picks. They're preparing to make a Memorial Cup run. That's pretty obvious. With selecting Aiden Castle, he had 31 points in 34 games. I think it was they're what they're doing with this one. They're enhancing their scoring, and that's a good pick by Oshawa because he could be a potential number 1 or 2 winger.
There you go. So now moving forward to the Windsor Spitfires with the 14th overall pick, Ryan Abraham, a guy who played for the Detroit CompuWare.
It's, again, another center that Windsor was going with, but I mean, they're kind of looking to enhance their depth a little bit too. Windsor's one of those teams that has like a kind of crazy offensive style. They're more of a flashy team, I feel.
Big team too. Well, they're a pretty big team.
And like look at Curtis Douglas, for example, who's 6'7".
He's a basketball player basically.
Yeah, that's basketball height.
Yeah.
So they've got a lot of speed and a lot of skill, which Jean-Luc Foudy, Curtis Douglas, and I think with picking Ryan Abraham, he's speedy.
Yeah, he's a smaller player
got
too.
The goal scoring ability.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a smaller player, which he can slip past other teams' defenses quite easily, as I've seen.
Yeah.
I think that it was a very wise pick by Windsor. I think that he contributes to that offensive style that they're used to.
Moving on to Peterborough at 15, Donovan McCoy, a right defenseman. I think a good pick for them because this is probably a guy who could step in. He doesn't have to be a first pairing defenseman, but with the team Peterborough built this year, there's a lot of players who have potential to make the jump to pro, but there's also a lot of players that could return. So this is not a crazy pick. Peterborough is not trying to do anything crazy here and have a superstar defenseman come in, but I think this is a good pick, a guy who could step in as a rookie and make an impact as well.
Yep, for sure. They've solidified their blue line. He doesn't necessarily have to be a top liner, like you said. I think it was a pretty good pick because he's a right-handed kind of more shutdown style defenseman.
Yep.
So that's I think one of the things that they needed the most was a defenseman who can kind of hold the line.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And obviously he's going to grow into that. And we've talked so much already about rookies and how they grow into their own over the course of a season. So it's a good pick for Peterborough, and obviously they're a very good team. So I would say the same kind of deal with the next pick at 16 with Flint, Gavin Hayes. He's a right winger, and I would say it's the same type of deal where they're just trying to enhance something that they have already, and they're a skilled team, a good team. And obviously, as you get into these later picks in the first round, you see more and more of that.
Exactly, and I think, by the way, Gavin Hayes is Avery Hayes' brother, the one who plays for the Bulldogs.
There you go.
It's kind of cool.
Adding another one to the family.
Family connection to the OHL.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go. You get
to the OHL family.
The OHL. It's like, because Flint's got the very kind of offensive style as we saw this year compared to last year, when they made the enhancements that they needed. They went out and got Anthony Popovich. They enhanced their forward core a little bit as well.
They made some great trades.
I think this is one of those. Oh yeah. I think this is one of those picks that they're just kind of really. It's like I said, enhancing what they have, just kind of maintaining that style. So Gavin Hayes is going to be a good addition.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Going back to the topic of centerman, of course, because the 2020 priority selection is just a priority selection for centerman, apparently.
Can we just rename it the 2020 centerman selection?
Centerman selection, yes. All the way through. No defenseman. You can't pick any wingers. It's got to be centers. Centerpieces to your franchise, and that's it, or bust.
Just not allowed to pick a goalie, no defenseman, nothing.
Nope.
Just no wingers. No
Nothing.
Wingers allowed.
It's the year of the centerman. If you played winger your whole life, sucks. Can't make the league. That's it. All 15 rounds, just centerman. Andrew LeBlanc goes to Kitchener at 17.
Honestly, I really like this one because, again, he's a pure goal scorer, and that's exactly what Kitchener needed. Especially look at the guys that they got at the trade deadline with Sarah Noel and up and coming rookies Jesse Fishman. All of these guys were really good. They've got that offensive style that they've maintained in the past. We saw remember when Gabriel Landeskog was playing for the Kitchener Rangers?
Yep.
They had that kind of offensive lethal style of hockey.
Yep. And we saw that last year in the second half, I'd say.
Yeah.
But and obviously with some guys graduating. But sorry, continue.
For sure, yeah. And they wanted to go with a top centerman that was an eventual top centerman that was gonna be a force for their franchise.
So here at 18, Saginaw picks. We're gonna get into this. They pick Adam Fantilli. Obviously, who was probably the consensus number one overall pick. And I have a theory that they picked him because they have a good team. And if he doesn't report, they will get a draft pick and they will get a compensatory pick next year in the draft. And they have a good team. They have a good team right now, so it's not going to kill them. So I have a feeling that maybe they were like, hey, if he falls to London and London does pick him and somehow convinces him to come play for them, it's going to give them problems in the playoffs. And Saginaw's in that window with London where they're competing together right now. So obviously, what's to be said about Adam Fantilli, a fantastic player. But I feel if he commits, that's scary because Saginaw will be a crazy good team. If he doesn't commit, I think it was a safe move for them because they will get that comp pick. And they're a good team already. And London doesn't get them. Doesn't get him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, look at Saginaw and London. They were going at each other's throats the whole year. It was a back and forth type of brawl for the top of the division. But yeah, if let's say Fantilli were to commit to Saginaw, I could see the Spirit doing some damage.
Oh yeah,
some lethal damage.
I think they would instantly be a favorite to win the J. Ross Robertson Cup next year. Instantly be the favorite.
For sure.
Yeah.
And look at some of the centermen that you already have on the team. You got Ryan Suzuki. You've got Cole Perfetti.
Which is enough. What else?
You've got Blake Jenkins. You don't need much more than that.
What else are you asking for? You could probably put one of those guys on the wing just for jokes, and you're still fine. Just as a joke, it doesn't matter. Yeah, but there's not much to be said. I think it's a safe pick because they are a good team. And they could afford to make that pick and keep him out of the hands of someone else in the division and somebody who could give them problems down the road. So moving along to, obviously, London had the next pick, the 19th overall pick. Ben Bujold, I believe.
I think it was a good pick because, well, in London, they had a lot of good players that they were kind of looking to fill voids with. Of course, Timken got cut. Jason Wilms graduating this year. They had a kind of need for a centerman. And I think they made a smart pick here, filling a need again for that bottom six. So I think that he could potentially he could go further than that, but I think he's the perfect bottom six centerman for them right now.
Now, I love the names this year. Ottawa at 20th because obviously they're the best team in the league this year. Again, they take a right winger, a smaller right winger, and Nicholas Moldenhauer. From the Toronto Titans. He, not exactly, I suppose, the most offensive guy, but a good pick for Ottawa nonetheless as they continue their dominance over the league.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he reminds me of when I was watching his highlight tape. He kind of reminds me of a younger version of Ty Felleber, in a way. And not because he's offensively sound, but he's got an all around well-rounded game. That's what I like about Moldenhauer.
So that obviously concludes the first round. I want to get into just a few picks, and obviously we talk about Mississauga more. We know it's we see them more, and I want to talk about a few more of their picks. From Quinty, they took Owen Beck. At 29th overall of the first round. I think this is a good pick, a little bit of a sleeper. A lot of people were saying, there's always steals of the draft. I wouldn't necessarily put this as a steal of the draft, but I think it's a very good pick for the Steelheads. And obviously last year, taking care of the defense, I think this year they were focusing more on the forward or offensive side of the ice. So I think this is a really good pick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I want to take a look at, first off, most notably Mississauga center core. So obviously they've got that first line center in Cole Schwint. They've got Kian Washkarak. They've got William Portocalis. They've even got Michael Stubbs who can play center as well. But I think that Owen Beck, if they were to give him a good chance, he could be another great asset to that center core. So I think that he's a really, really good offensive centerman and that's kind of what the Steelheads needed as well. They needed more center presence than they had.
Depth.
So I think it's a good
sure.
pick. I think it's a great pick.
Yeah, and the classic, I guess it's not a saying, but as many know, I think as a centerman, it's easier to convert to the wing if need be than a winger learn to play center and take draws. So if Mississauga finds that they do have enough centermen, they have that depth, and guys are comfortable playing center in their roles on their lines, then I feel like, worst case scenario, it's always easier to put a centerman on the wing than a winger on the center. So, but moving forward now to the 38th overall pick, this is a draft pick the Steelheads got from Saginaw. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm assuming it's in one of the Owen Tippett or Ryan McLeod trades. And they take.
I think it was from the McLeod trade, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, and I heard I've heard on Twitter that this is the steal of the draft in terms of this is a guy that probably should have went higher. So the Steelheads get a scorer, another scorer, and again we're talking about addressing needs. They get a scorer out of Oshawa, Carson Christie,
and this is one of the guys that I'm most excited for watching. Excuse me. He's a right winger, who had double the points that he had 41 goals on the season. So in 36 games. So 62 points in total.
Yep.
By picking him as low as they did, well, pretty much in the second round, I'm surprised he didn't go higher. And he could be one of the best draft steals in this season's draft. That's without a doubt. I'm just I'm in disbelief. Like, I can't believe that how great of a pick that was.
Yeah, it's a good pick. Like it's like this guy puts up points, and we were talking about people or players that put up points in this draft. He scores goals. This guy scores goals.
Yeah.
So this is exciting. This is exciting. They get 3 players in the top, I guess, 40 of the draft that you can legitimately be very excited about. Possibly, if not making the team, then 2 years from now, you're looking at some exciting pieces and some guys who can put up points and score. And the Steelheads play a very offensive type style, and we've seen it. They play a very pushing the puck up the ice style. They don't like to spend a lot of time in their own zone at all. So this is good.
Yeah, that's especially as we've seen this year. Like they went from being 3-6 in the first 9 games of the regular season to almost coming back within 2 points of the Central Division.
Right. Yeah.
First spot in the Central Division. They have shown that they're the most persistent and one of the most pain in the butt teams offensively.
Sure. Yeah.
It's extremely hard to shut down their offense, but now getting guys like Carson Christie and Owen Beck, it's going to be even harder if these guys make the team to shut down their already overpowered offense.
Right. And you need to add those guys. Like, they have a system that works. Yeah. When you add guys who complement the system, you're going to be successful. So some exciting times coming up for sure. And I wanted to ask you, just before we wrap up here, in your opinion, I guess, it could be anybody, who do you think did the best this draft, I guess? Any team, it could be just because of one pick. But who do you think in this year's draft, came away as a winner?
You know what? It's tough to say. I'm gonna say it's not to be biased here. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna have 2 winners. I'm gonna say the North Bay Battalion because they picked Dallin Wakely in the second round, and he's one of the better centermen in that draft. And they picked Ty Nelson, who is a pretty strong offensive defender. So they win in that respect. And then I'm gonna say the Mississauga Steelheads because they got everything that they needed now. They've got that strong defense. By the way, they drafted Thomas Harley's brother in the 14th round.
Yes, I was going to mention that actually right before we wrapped up, and I'm glad you brought it up. So a nice little thing there for the family, them drafting him in the 14th round. I thought that was really nice of them.
Yeah, nice little family ties. So I think that so like I was saying about the Steelheads, they got everything they needed. They have that strong defense now. Kai Edmonds has proved that they can be a solid goaltender, so they've already had the solid goaltending. Yep. And now they've enhanced their offense by getting 2 scoring forwards that could potentially help them in a Robertson Cup run.
Yep, for sure.
I'm going to say North Bay and Mississauga.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you on a bunch of those, like on a bunch of those points, I guess. I would say Mississauga did very well this draft. Last year they addressed something they need. This year they're addressing something they need, and it worked last year, so who's not to say it's going to work next year, and you have a more well-rounded team, and obviously with Kai Edmonds in net, again, as an OA, he showed last year that he can be one of the best goaltenders in the league, so it's a good it was a good draft for Mississauga for sure. North Bay did well as well for themselves, obviously not going with the risky pick, because if you pick Fantilli, he doesn't report, then you just don't have a top-end guy coming into your system anymore. So getting that defense, and you need help on defense, that's a good pick. Another team I feel did great was Saginaw because if you don't take that risk because you are a good team, and you can take that risk, then you have a situation where a team that is in your division could take a risk and win, and the guy could commit. So it's a good day. I think they just, you know what, you gotta cut your losses sometimes, and I think it was something that they needed to do. And if he commits to them, awesome. Like, that's good luck to the rest of the league.
Yeah, good luck to anyone trying to compete in the West.
Yeah. But for sure, this year, I think a lot of teams, just to name a few, obviously those teams, but I think this year a lot of teams got what they needed. So that's good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just expand on Saginaw again, too.
Yep.
If you didn't take Fantilli, and let's say you did get the compensatory pick, I think they would have done well either way. They kind of have proven that they're an offensive threat, and they're not just an offensive threat, they're an all-around threat. But I think that they played it safe either way. There was no losing in that situation. If he doesn't commit, then he doesn't commit. But if he does, that gives you more of a reason to compete because you are legitimate contenders with him.
For sure.
So it's even better. Hey, there's no losing.
I think, yeah, you're exactly right. I think it's a perfect situation where they could gain something from this, and they could prevent something from stopping them from winning. Right? Like, it's a real situation.
Yeah.
I think this year's draft was definitely an interesting one, a really good one for some teams. Some teams obviously making picks for the future, not guys that are going to step in right away and be amazing superstars, but really adding to their already good lineups in teams like London and Ottawa. So we'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Tyler, for joining me for doing this 2020 OHL draft review. If you want to, I guess, talk about some of your podcasts, where to find you, your Twitter, Instagram, where to listen, where to watch.
Yeah, for sure. So we're on Spotify right now, so you can find us at Pro Shot Podcast on Spotify. Same thing on YouTube, it's Pro Shot Podcast, and then the same thing for our Instagram, Twitter, basically the same username, at Pro Shot _podcast for Instagram, at Pro Shot Podcast for Twitter, and then for next season we've got a bunch of big stuff planned, and hopefully more OHL discussion and more things like that. So let's make it a good one. Let's see what happens on the off season.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for having me on, by the way. I really enjoyed recording. No
problem. It was great to have you on and talk about this year's draft and some refreshing stuff to talk about, I guess, in sports and the Ontario Hockey League. You can find, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can also find this review show on Spotify under my name, the same as my YouTube channel, Darius Dominguez. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching and joining us for this review. Did you like it? Subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next one.
Yeah, I will not stop, I cannot stop, I'm gonna win the fight. Always running towards my goals, faster than the speed of light. Flying over any obstacle, I swear that I'm a kite. Every struggle is a blessing if you're looking at it right. Unstoppable, yeah, I'm unstoppable.